Gauntlet of Verification. Before we go too deep into the omniverse/God and love discussion, we should say a few things about the foundations of religious observance to keep from falling back into ignorance. There are no ancient/archaic, as few as 100 years or older, texts in our modern world that can provide enough certainty of original intent for fanatical, hostile, or violent discussions or actions for or against their meanings by either believer, agnostic, scientist, or atheist. This also applies to documentations of all history written by either the victors, victims, neutral observers, archaeological theorists, etc. With this pronouncement we are not removing value, only toxicity, strife, violence, negativity, visions, etc. This may initially disturb, undermine, deflate, or anger those who have invested any or all their lives to learning all the details and minutiae of their denominationally specific translation of the Old or New Testaments, Upanishads, Talmud, Quran, Sunnah, Bhagavad Gita, Tripitaka, etc. After acquiring the freedom and complete satisfaction of living in the essence that some of these religions try to convey in loving God with all our faculties and being, you will be glad that there is nothing more to argue about or stress over between various religions and between the religious and the non-religious, religion vs science. This will not only be a second resurrection of Jesus and God's message but also of dead or lost souls, or what we will refer to as the Gauntlet of Verification to avoid repeating this list. Becomes apparent that a combination of etymology, the study of the origin of words and the way in which their meanings have changed throughout history. An example can be the potential use of the informal slang of an era or culture or the current use of slang versions of the original that will mislead translations and interpretations. Groovy, hip, dig it, cool, grass, gas, far out, etc. are hippie terms used in the 1960s that may already be out of common use after 60 years. Exegesis, critical explanation or interpretation of a text, especially of scripture. Philology, branch of knowledge that deals with the structure, historical development, and relationships of a language or languages. Dialects, a form of a language that is peculiar to a specific region or social group. The dialect, of the original speaker and listener at the time spoken or passed along the oral tradition chain and the dialect of the writers when finally written. The English language variations spoken in Jamaica, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, southern U.S. and some U.S. cities and neighborhoods, Australia, all colonies of English imperialism and elsewhere, by persons literate and partially literate in English, are some current examples that can and often do lead to current breakdowns in communications as evidence for potential past breakdowns. Other languages and cultures will have their own barriers to verification. Translations, as of July 2018. Wikipedia claimed there were 109 English translations of the Old and New Testament combined Bible with another 180+ separate New Testament translations and 74 English translations of the Quran. Each translation is at least slightly if not completely different than the others. This is not counting all the additional variations in other language translations. One Quran translation tries to convey a religion of neutrality while others interpret the most evil and violent belief system on earth, while others are of varying degrees between these two extremes. No one knows which one is the true religion of Islam or which ones are of Muhammadism, Abu Bakrism, Alism, Umarism, Uthmanism, etc. Of 62 English translations of New Testament John 4:24, 16 use God is a spirit, 45 use God is spirit and 1 uses God is sheer being itself, spirit, where the letter A makes a world of difference. Again, in Luke 17:21, of these 62 translations, 18 say Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is among you. 24 say it is within you. 16 say it is in your midst. 2 say here with you. 1 says within your grasp. 2 say inside. And 1 says, ruling the lives of his people. The Old and New Testaments combined are said to have 684,746 words and 3,566,480 letters depending on the translation. This presents practically innumerable opportunities for misinterpretations, mistranslations, ignorance, or deception. Interpretations, the action of explaining the meaning of something, with actual and potential biases for or against positive or negative meanings. Not all with canvas and brush will replicate vivid images of the original. Relative handfuls of people decide the meanings of ancient/archaic texts for billions of readers. Current and past cultural influences. Oral traditions and transmissions and the commonly understood potential for variations, distortions, exaggerations, minimalizations, etc., Chinese whispers or telephone, passing a story around a room from one person to the next and comparing the beginning and ending versions of that story. Original versions are often lost. The original observer sees, hears, smells, touches, tastes, and experiences the people, places, things, miracles, and activities being described with their understandings of their choices of words, while those that listen to the observer's verbal explanation, repetition, or description of the words spoken or event must reinterpret through their understandings of the words they hear, without actual experience. And then 100, 1000, 2000, 3,000 years later we must interpret the meanings or intent of the original speaker or experience through the filter of our current understandings of the words we read or those preached to us. Semantics, branch of linguistics and logic concerned with meaning. Prejudice for or against the speaker, prophet, messenger, apostle leading to exaggerations of their talents or flaws. In conflicting media versions of U.S. presidents, political opponents, foreign leaders, and social engineering, Jews, Christians, Mohammedans, other religions, Gnostics, and atheists have a wide and varying view of Jesus. Provenance, the place of origin or earliest known history of something, record of ownership of speakers, listeners, writers, and their documents of the period, even exact replications of false, distorted or forged ancient/archaic texts leads to false modern texts. Humans choosing which stories, evidence, books, materials, and sources were excluded or included in the final editions or canon of all ancient/archaic texts and their modern representations. Literacy, linguistic competence, and intelligence of speakers, listeners, writers, interpreters, translators, and readers. Sex, group of people with somewhat different religious beliefs, typically regarded as heretical, from those of a larger group to which they belong. Lack of facial expressions, body language, and vocal tones in the written word, seen in the clumsiness and communication errors in modern texting and emailing. Potential and actual uses of irony, sarcasm, mockery, parables, humor, deception, etc. that are difficult to discern in the written word or by those that were targets of these methods. Scientific conflicts with non-allegorically written ancient/archaic text stories, unsupported by claims of the miraculous, creation, Adam and Eve, and Noah's Ark. Limited understandings in all areas of life and the natural world of the people of the period and era, limiting the communications between the speakers and listeners. Conflicting and variant stories or passages within the same ancient/archaic texts. Communication limitations or restrictions imposed by antagonistic forces of the times the messages were conveyed. obscure language or code words or dog whistling to avoid detections and the penalties that may rain down upon violators of outlawed practices and anything related. We currently need an urban dictionary to understand intentionally cryptic and unknowingly devolved languages used by the many different racial, ideological, religious, corporate supremacists, criminals, gangs, hipsters, youth, other secret societies of our modern era. In our current 21st century, we have also become aware of the current difficulties in expressing opinions and ideas that the local, state, national and international thought police, social engineers, and slash or media do not approve of that may cause loss of job, reputation, freedom and in some cases life. These and possibly additional confusions of certainty, to be included as they are exposed in time, leave all ancient/archaic texts and their modern representations unable to legitimately argue for or against their original meanings, original validity, chosen status, superiority, exclusion, killing, enslaving, participation, etc. Based upon these conclusions, there cannot be a religious war anywhere on the planet fought by or against any religion based upon ancient/archaic texts. Humans need to wake from their dogmatic textual blindness, sleep, spiritual coma, labyrinth, or dangerous zombie-like states. Much of the errant ancient/archaic textual dogma has been, is and will be a mind virus, inducing dangerous zombie-like humans living in mental cocoons harming themselves and others while they are blindly convinced they are performing the will of God as in Old Testament Jewish and Muhammadan genocides and genocidal manifest destinies, New Testament crucifixions, modern terrorism, decapitations, wars, civil upheavals and violent riots, etc. If ancient/archaic texts had life or truth in the past for their generations, then the gauntlet of verification and the divisions and religious chaos of the 21st century have exposed textual questions regarding that life and truth and the hope of unifying around them. We could even go so far as to say that all the errors in all ancient/archaic texts can be attributed to flaws found in the gauntlet of verification. This awareness releases both atheists and believers from the conflicts surrounding the obvious errors found in current versions of ancient/archaic texts, which atheists legitimately attack and believers stubbornly, delusionally, denyingly or ignorantly cling. Of this writing there are no legitimate toxic arguments for or against almost anything written in ancient/archaic texts because no one knows completely what all the original words, tense, or meanings of what is written in their versions of ancient/archaic text. The conflict is over. Let's move on to unification. We do not want to dismiss any beneficial ancient/archaic wisdom that can be gleaned out of these historical documents. What we want is to defuse, circumvent, marginalize, or remove all possible conflicts and abuse that may, does, and will arise from anything found in questionable ancient/archaic text passages. There may have been and continues to be communications between the omniverse or God and humans, certainly because of our interconnectedness, but as with the Adam and Eve, and Noah stories, the certainty of meanings in our current interpretations and translations of ancient/archaic texts have been blurred with uncertainty. This does not change the certainty of uncertainty and therefore indefensibility of clinging to everything written in all ancient/archaic texts. God is not dead. All religions supposedly representing God that are based on ancient/archaic texts are clouded in interesting mystery. We may only be able to glean out the generally accepted principles applicable to 21st century humanity from these texts, as we are now doing in this writing, as a form of moral archaeology. Given the uncertainty of the written word, there are many things we may never know about the past in general. God gave specific instructions about how to live ritualistically and/or behave within society and nature in order to meet God's approval for entrance into heaven or God's grace, and we can no longer be clear about what those original detailed instructions were. Then not only may we as individuals be living and behaving contrary to those instructions because of unknown or unknowable alterations in the fog of uncertainty surrounding the gauntlet of verification, we may be leading others to hell at the same time. As individuals, we should be careful what we believe for ourselves and even more careful what we teach our children and others, or teach conscientiously, or avoid teaching ideas that rely on ancient/archaic texts to support our teachings because of the certainty that we will be passing on error. Hell exists. Then our passing on these mechanistic or ritualistic errors will be spiritually fatal. No more rigidly founding ideas and beliefs upon everything written in ancient/archaic texts. Although we should not discount or dismiss all the moral fabric in ancient/archaic texts, with that which is written in ancient/archaic texts no longer valid for the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual humanitarian poisons inherent in heated arguments, debates, conflicts, dismemberments, killings, wars, cultural supremacy, isolation, ostracization, demonizations, or any other negative interactions, we may be moving on to the question of what is useful. This writing will try to use the apparent facts of today blended with that which emerges positively from the mist of the past, for a version of life that will allow either religious or scientific views of life, or being disinterested in either without making a difference to the points being made here. Harmonious love is what we all want, whether it is instinctive and randomly selected or given and directed by God. Forced adherence to every single letter or minute detail of unverifiable ancient/archaic texts, other than the path of love of all, with all, by all, is at least a moral/spiritual crime in subtle cases and an abhorrent crime against humanity in cases where bodily harm, death, demonization, oppression, subjugation, and limitations of harmonious freedom occur. It cries out for dilution, revision, or elimination. Quotations, as best we can find/read them from ancient/archaic texts, will be used for bridge building to create a path for those stuck in ignorance to move freely and harmoniously into the 21st century. Much of the foundational source materials of the major and many minor ancient/archaic religions of the world cannot be fully or clearly validated. All religions with their myriad sects based upon ancient/archaic texts are now neutralized, dead or dying. We cannot rely too heavily upon the uncertainty and divisiveness of most ancient/archaic texts, and much of what is written in those we can still use to support a globally harmonious humanity. Past and present religious alienations, mischief, and conflicts make this abundantly clear. We must now move into the world we know of as the living, in the present, or what applies to our currently accepted version of reality. Loving all in the omniverse/God is the essence of monotheism and the fulfillment of our natural instincts. This is all that we need. Rest can remain in novelty, mythology, history, obscurity. The Adam and Eve and Noah's Ark stories did not happen as they are currently written in the Hebrew Bible. After all of the potentials for error written above, there may have been a chance the stories had some truth in unrecognizably different versions. A local flood with an ark carrying local animals may be one time, but have morphed into what we now have as written puzzles. Therefore, all further biblical characters and stories referenced in the Bible after these errors are at least questionable, along with anyone who bases their beliefs upon this ideological wet sand. Although multiple flood stories throughout history support the possibility of major floods among many groups of people, exact details are lacking. Depending on how we interpret the minimalist wording in the biblical Noah's Ark story, in some translations that say that God brought the animals to Noah for him to put on the ark, while some tell the story that Noah followed God's directions and gathered the animals. 56 English translations of the biblical story. 25 say Noah brought them into the ark. 21 say God brought them to him. And 10 versions could be interpreted either way. It is certain that Noah did not go to Africa and collect lions, leopards, cheetahs, elephants, all the grazing animals, all the monkey and ape species, all the insects, bacteria, birds, clouds. There are no indications of flying elephants, walruses, tigers, bears, etc. Practically all the witnesses to this ark and flood would have died at that time and could not tell their versions. With modern technologically advanced communication, transportation, and observation techniques, we are still discovering new species and varieties of plants and animals. Noah did not and could not have even traveled to Australia, North and South America, China, Russia, the Arctic, the Antarctic. Noah could not have even gone to Canada to capture a pair of polar bears alive and then transport them alive and feed and clean up after them for a little over a year on a ship/boat. It would have taken a lifetime of travel just to get to South America and back with divine guidance, which is nowhere suggested. The organization, transportation, capture, feeding and cleanup are currently impossible with fleets of modern equipment. No modern zoo or ship can arrange and maintain all of Earth's living things. Only this Earth can almost sustain all the species of this Earth without naturally occurring extinctions. The enclosed design of the ship would have killed all living things in the ark in a short period of time when the gases from the waste products began to accumulate. Lighting a candle, torch, or fire of any kind in these gases would have been dangerous. Noah and his family could not have cleaned up after all the animals nor fed them in a timely manner. It is hard enough for individuals and families to keep up with cat litter boxes or walking the dog. There was not even enough room on the ark for a year's supply of food for all, and forget about its collection and preservation. The earth never had nor ever will have enough water to flood its entire surface up the heights above the tallest mountains. Where did this extra water come from and where did it recede? And no, the shifting of the tectonic plates causing the mountains to rise and the water to recede does not explain where the water was before the flood. There would have been no dry land. Noah's Ark did not happen as it is written. It did not have to for global loving harmony. Doggedly defending literal interpretations of ancient/archaic texts is a form of cultural or self-induced insanity. Noah's Ark is a pivotal foundation story for the monotheistic triad of Judaism, Christianity, and Mohammedanism. Because it is incomplete, false, or falsely written or misinterpreted or mistranslated or mythological, then most of what is founded upon fallacy/myth is cultural or social development at its best and/or insanity or deception at its worst. Much of the ancient/archaic text-based monotheistic triad crumbles to the ground with some of its practical parts usable today for other arrangements, as we will unearth, uncover, or recover. It is possible the ark carried local animals during a local flood, but that is not how it is written. Therefore, every other literal interpretation of any other parts of the Bible are left to human guesswork and not blind faith in actual words of an omniversal God. Only the omniverse/God may know what the original intent or meanings of all the minutiae in ancient/archaic texts were and are now. If there ever was a connection, we do not. Even irrational or false beliefs in life can pacify the inquiring or doubting mind enough for an individual to turn or return their attention to the fulfillment of our instinctive drive for harmony. The British, Greek, Roman, Mongol, Ottoman, Egyptian, Qing, Russian, Spanish, Persian or Achaemenian, Umayyad, Abbasid, and other empires of the past and present have often believed in what are now generally considered mythologies, yet they thrived, conquered, and grew into great empires lasting years, decades and even centuries. Success in empire building apparently does not require religious truth. Because an empire was large and successful does not infer legitimacy upon its supernatural beliefs. Might or power means some things for certain times but not absolute and unchanging truth for all times and especially during the eventual degenerations of these powerful empires. Again, pacifications of doubts about the unknown and possibly unknowable may contribute to freeing the mind from supernatural doubts for conquest, empire building, additional creative actions. Given the practical absurdity of reading and knowing the pure unadulterated original intent and meaning of Jesus, Krishna, Buddha, Moses, Muhammad, Mahavira, Confucius, Lao Tzu, Zoroaster, and others, we are left with the certainty that all religions and most of their followers are being led astray by their own irrefutably unverifiable and errant source materials while interfering with the potential for current global harmonious unity. Detachment from error will be needed. This being written, we do not want to destroy any useful or valuable elements of belief structures that have played roles in establishing and developing moral fabrics and social structures for modern societies, as we currently know them. We will unearth valuable gems here in the following pages, from these ancient/archaic texts and what we think we know of human history written by archaeologists, victors, victims and possibly neutral observers. Nietzsche's "God is dead" quote was disturbing in his day and continues to present a precarious social situation. Killing or allowing God to die in the religious mind and discourse without a replacement for those reliant upon blind faith as their opium, may create chaotic withdrawal symptoms into an open and uncontrollable abyss among some segments of our societies as is happening in many Western societies. This realization may be acceptable for the individual to have but once the blind faith-based populations realize they have been led astray intentionally or unintentionally or that there may be no afterlife and/or no punishment for wrongs committed today and in their past, they will inevitably seek substitutions for their current dogmatic opiates, fall into depression, commit suicide, or follow their own self-centered and/or self-cultivated morality at odds with the established fabric, probably only controlled by a militant dictatorship. This may be, unless we produce and maintain a reasonable, mutually agreeable, and harmonious alternative or realignment of current core values. We will be trying to bring that back to life here. God is certainly not dead, but much of ancient/archaic text-based religion is dead, dying or clearly foggy and interfering with world peace. Evolutionary natural law has been adapting guidelines or instincts for the living for as long as they have been alive on this planet. We will try to build bridges from the false security of error and myth using the language of the large and slow to enlighten masses of believers to nurse them over the tumultuous waters of social anarchy and nihilism inherent in the death of their gods and foundational texts into an agreed upon rational harmony with our world and nature in sync with the 21st century understanding of the monotheistic universal God. There will be or are too many sincere believers in the dark not to try to reach them with a more solidly founded alternative. Bridging unsupportable religious texts and beliefs into scientific rationality eases the transition into enlightenment versus blunt and adversarial magnifying of that light into a burning, sadistic focal point in callous refutation and denial of a believer's comfort sources. We currently have some scientists, rationalists, and/or atheists masquerading as bearers of scientific truth/light who are intellectual punks, juvenile delinquents, psychopaths or sociopaths, philosophical anarchists, and/or impotent bullies throwing tantrums against mythological and actual father figures while getting perverse pleasure from destroying religious structures and human belief without empathy or contributing to repair, placement, reinterpretations, and/or rebuilding. Fear of the unknown or mysterious may lead to a fixation with or clinging to reasonable facts or what may currently be provable while discontent with what is known, established, and already proven may lead to fascination with the mysterious or unknown. There are those that may want the certainty of mathematical rationality to pacify their fears. There are those that rebel against the confinement of these reasonable certainties by seeking freedom or escape in mystery and science fiction. The atheistic, positivistic, scientific, analytical, so-called, masculine, doubting and / or purely logical-minded persons may be using, consciously or unconsciously, may be a genetic or hereditary predisposition, one function, possibly left hemisphere, of the brain, while the believer, artist, musician, lover, intuitive, so-called, feminine and / or trusting persons may be using another function of the brain, possibly right hemisphere. There are some who are more balanced in their use of left and right brain, logic, and love, etc. Often the use of one brain function can come at the expense of the other functions of the brain and can be at odds with the beliefs, thoughts, and actions of those who use and see the world through the opposite side. A form of individual, social, or cultural cognitive dissonance. Reason can objectify, analyze, and imagine itself separate from life as voyeurs, love and being experience it. Believers in mystery may live in intellectual darkness while intellectuals may be uncomfortable in the dark. If something is true in an enduring sense, then all the inquiry and debate in our world cannot alter its truth. Truth can only be ignored or temporarily repressed with seen or unseen consequences. If on the other hand something is false, then it cannot stand complete inquiry or debate. When a fallacy is presented as true, much denial, murder, deception / lying, suppression, conflict, propaganda, ignorance, and energy are needed to keep the false appearing true. This writing will present a version of life using currently accepted truths, what may be possible truths, possible unintentional errors, or religious and spiritual values or principles, spark-like and / or seed-like ideas that may stimulate others to more awareness, the occasional use of emotional masturbation expressed verbally to lighten up the seriousness of this mission. The ultimate plan is an Earth inhabited by humans in harmony with themselves and the omniverse / nature / God. Although there has been an attempt to communicate with religionists and atheists, conservatives and liberals, believers and non-believers, artists and scientists, lovers and logicians, and / or feminine and masculine-minded persons throughout this writing by trying to use a common language, it can still be seen at times that the intended audience is using primarily reason while at other times the reader is assumed to be primarily immersed in faith or mystery. There may be too much religious terminology and quotations for the positivist, rationalist, and atheist at times, and at other times there may not be enough for the religious. Before either extreme starts to whine, please get a grip on yourself and move forward to your role of contributing to a world in loving harmony with naturally occurring commonly shared values. If you have exclusively focused on either the intuitive or the rational approach to living, you may benefit from examining or experiencing the unfamiliar world of another view. If life is disturbed, then a balancing of opposites may be just what is needed to remove the disturbance and generate harmony. John Locke, 1632–1704. New opinions are always suspected, and usually opposed, without any other reason but because they are not already common. Some of the goals of this writing are to find common ideological ground for the harmonious loving unification of all peoples, nations, races, and cultures within the omniverse / God. To examine our interconnectedness with all things at the particle level and the awareness that every particle of body / being is borrowed from and will return to nature. To become and remain aware of the interactions that all our senses always have with the atomically charged particle activity in and around us. To examine what omniversal love is and its importance for individual well-being, global unity and peace while showing that all or most of the drives of all living things, consciously or unconsciously, are to achieve and maintain harmonious loving union with the omniverse/God. All our instincts and drives have been given to us by something from somewhere, with the clear majority of all our physical, mental, and emotional attributes being operated by something other than ourselves. To expose the certainty of uncertainty found in the gauntlet of verification of all archaic/ancient texts used to discriminate, divide, alienate, war with and cause bodily, psychological, spiritual, and emotional harm to humans within and outside religions based on these uncertainties. To show the importance of abandoning divisive thought and practice. To expose the errant political, racial, nationalist, economic, environmental, religious, social, and philosophical policies that humanity has been and is currently living while proposing psychologically and/or spiritually sound alternatives to these corruptions of natural law. To show that some religious beliefs and science are more in harmony than has been commonly believed, or that in some areas of thought and belief they are speaking about the same things using different words. To shine the light of scientific discovery into the dark recesses of religious dogma and ritual while shining the medicinal light of spiritual or psychological principles onto the world of reason or science. The term or word God as used in most monotheistic religions is referring to the omniverse and how we are a part, product, creation, or children of this omniverse/God. This will not be proving the existence of God. Rather, it will be showing the correlation between the omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient God of monotheism and the omnipresent, omnipotent omniverse of science. To propose common awareness among humans that we are composed of and surrounded by atomically charged energy/spirit, and that humanity can continue to expand the horizons of what is humanly possible not only in the physical but mental, psychic, and spiritual dimensions also. To enhance or support the belief of those who believe in loving harmony and may not need such evidence, propose insights that an agnostic may find interesting, and reduce or eliminate barriers between the narrow-minded thinking of both atheists and believers. To introduce logic to the believer and mystery to the logician. To weave in the possible or even probable necessity for the society that chooses loving harmony as its means, goal, and/or way of life, and the responsibility of its members for being their best, most, or all their lives. There may be or will be times where struggle with ourselves and others not participating will be needed to attain and then maintain loving harmony. There are the ever-present demands of nature and the imperialist strivings of or from a wide variety of different cultures, nations, ideologies, and individuals that must be changed or adapted to. Certainty that positive change is in store for all who read through to the end of this document. Some will experience dramatic, unforgettable, life-changing transformations, while others will be pleasantly amused or intellectually stimulated. Even if you disagree with any or all this writing, you are sure to find yourself thinking new and/or better thoughts. Almost all the writing has been written while in a relatively loving and harmonious state of being, so the reader may also have to be there to appreciate and comprehend properly. Much of this writing is written with the assumption that the reader is, will, or may be interested in the fulfillment of love, living in harmony with all and/or resolving world problems. The reader is more interested in or blinded by money, status, power, success, anger, alcohol, drugs, lust, greed, public opinion, blind/ignorant/irrational faith in the guidance of blind guides, popes, mams, rabbis, gurus, archaic/ancient texts, etc., politics, divisive and/or supremacist political, cultural, racist, nationalist, economic, or religious ideologies, competition, fear, and/or any other negative, and divisive pursuit or human condition. and much of what is written may pass in front of uninterested or distracted minds or be too contrary to these pursuits to participate. This may exclude most of the global human population. Love, honesty, forgiveness, acceptance of what cannot or should not be changed, faith, courage, restitution, sensitivity, charity, living in the moment, clear conscience, sexual balance, the harmonious loving awareness and union with an atomically charged omniversal energy or spirit of God, do not belong to any particular religion, science, philosophy, race, or nation. They belong to all of the living. These tools for achieving harmony satisfy our instinctive drive for harmony and may have been developed through natural selection or God, for survival of the most harmonious. These spiritual and or psychological principles are inherent natural laws of being human, agreeable to most peoples and medicinal for all the social ills on the planet. They are tools that can be used to unveil and nurture our instinctive drive for harmonious loving oneness with the world around us. A more thorough list of spiritual and or psychological principles and their opposites is provided in the reference section. Most societies, religions, and individuals will agree that these principles are valuable even if they do not authentically practice them. Jesus, Buddha and Krishna are the most popular spiritual leaders of the past and present who have focused on these principles, although many of their followers have lost this focus. Humans have documented, worshipped, lorded, and sold these common spiritual principles in cake sales, funding drives, plagues, flags, book sales, bumper stickers, fortune cookies, therapy sessions, counseling, medications, stone tablets, statues, rituals, political and group slogans, songs, banners, t-shirts, punitive systems, many other overt displays, but often have a difficult time truly living them and sharing them freely without feeling compelled to make an indentured servant or slave out of those they attempt or pretend to hell. Getting past the practices and prejudices within the sciences, yes, the sciences, cultures, religions, races, governments and societies that create us versus them thinking, attitudes and behaviors as opposed to we are all one in the omniverse/God, may seem like common sense or something that may not have to be spoken, yet forces like competition, greed, ethnocentricity, alienating, isolationistic religious beliefs, racism, nationalism, dogmas and rituals, irrationality and distorted rationality, cultural resentments, closed-mindedness and other social dysfunctions or can be contrary to this common-sense approach to creating a conscientiously harmonious loving social union of humanity within nature. We will be proposing a kind of moral, spiritual, and or humanistic archaeology to uncover these pre-existing natural laws that are, for many of us, buried under layers of public opinion, erroneous political, religious, societal beliefs, dogma, ritual, unconscious childhood damage, conditioning, and fears, political, media and marketing manipulation, debt and labor slavery, and excessive human-made law. This is an age of information. Any questions regarding what is written can either be found online or in an encyclopedia. While examining, theorizing, or suggesting resolutions to unresolved problems in our world, we will start with the subject of God, as one of the most divisive subjects in human affairs that can be the most cohesive. We find common ground among most or all humanity. This writing thinks that it is possible for this union. Knowing God is crucial to being able to love God with all our faculties as Jesus has urged us to. You cannot love a transcendent God. You can only delusionally imagine that you are. If your God is transcendent, you are lost and need to be found. So pay attention. Yes, you too. There are 4 critical unifying understandings that are needed. mostly overlooked by almost all the monotheistic triad Judaism, Christianity, Mohammedanism, and humanity. When it comes to Jesus' primary emphasis on God's original Deuteronomy 6:5 message of loving God with all our faculties and being. These are 1. Who or what is God? 2. What is love? 3. How do we love God every moment of our lives? And 4. Are we ready, willing, and able to devote our entire lives to loving God with all our faculties and being? If we do not understand or live any one of these spiritual principles and actions, we will not experience, comprehend, or appreciate the life-affirming value in the euphoria of unconditional omniversal love, and we will not fulfill Jesus' reminder message from God to completely return to harmonious love with God, and we cannot call ourselves Jewish, Christian, Muslim, Hindu, etc. Are you ready to join the 21st century and meet the God of science and religion? Are you ready to know who we are to love with all our faculties and being as the first of the 4 conditions? So, then let's proceed with an expansion of our awareness and / our consciousness in preparation for this meeting.
All right, there's chapter 2. The Gauntlet of Verification. When I first understood that there was a Gauntlet of Verification, I remember being very deflated because I had built up an elaborate belief system based or founded on the New International Bible and the New American Bible. And when the rug was pulled out from me, I felt very deflated and kind of lost. But after a while, I realized that some of the arguments that atheists have, legitimate arguments, um, and some of the struggles that people go through to make Noah's Ark work, Adam and Eve, or the time frame of the biblical lineage of Methuselah and Adam and Eve, and on up to Moses, and it's a new earth ideology. None of that is because of the Gauntlet of Verification. You don't have to get into arguments about the exact validity and meaning of what's written in your ancient text. You can cool your jets and realize that there's something, a message that shines through the fog of all that. It's a lighthouse, a beacon in the fog of uncertainty and debate and arguments and discussions. And that is, we are instinctively driven towards love and harmony with everything. And that fulfills the idea that Deuteronomy 6:5, love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And Jesus' re-emphasis of that for the forgiveness of sins and being in peace and finding heaven by loving God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and seeing God in all things. Well, there's other chapters coming up that will address some more of that. So, all right, that's the second chapter here on the will to flower.